Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to some of the attendees that we have. Welcome to the session featuring labor market for the sustainable and livable cities, and really nice to have you here, meaning this topic is also important to you alongside the regulatory, behavioral and technological aspects of the smart and livable cities. My name is Nesterova. I'm leading mobility expertise group within Breda University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, and I'll be moderating this session today. So before digging into our discussion today, which will also has a couple of house rules that I would like to share with you, which will also help us to wait a couple of minutes more until more audience gets to the room. So first of all, please write your comments in the chat session in case if you want to communicate something with us. And if you would like to ask us a question, one of the panelists, or to participate in one of the speakers to participate in the panel discussion, please ask your question using the Q&A area of the platform. You can always view who is attending in the People tab. And in case if you would like to see presentations in the larger scale, you can use you can hide the chart or tap into the full screen icon. So this session is being recorded, and recordings will be made available online after the conference. Also, please keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking. This is, of course, relevant for speakers. And we will make sure that we are really on time in this session in order for you to enjoy the rest of the program today. Finally, after session, check the event chart, polls, people, and question and answer steps to see if there's more interesting information that you would like to get out of the session. You can also discover the other upcoming sessions. We encourage you to try the networking functions of the platform, and you can always send direct messages to other participants in case if some speakers really triggered your attention and you would like to talk further with them. So, on board of this session today, we have a really complementary panel of speakers. We have representatives of industry, universities, research organizations, that together with us will zoom into the disruptive technologies and ongoing socioeconomic trends in mobility, built environment, and urban logistics. And together with us will draw some conclusions on skills and competencies that are already and will be actually more required on the future labor market for sustainable and smart cities. We have today on board with us Sergey Patsko, Vice President of Custom AI at Capgemini, Hans Quak, Professor of Smart Cities at Breda University of Applied Sciences and Senior Researcher at Torino in the Netherlands, Dmitry Korolev, CEO at Traceair, Wolfgang Schade, Senior Researcher at M5 Germany, and Cristina Pronello, Professor of Transport in Politecnico di Torino. So each speaker will present their views in short presentation, followed by panel discussion. And we are really encouraging you, and you are very welcome to ask your question within Q&A session at any moment of it. So I would like to invite to stage our first speaker, Sergey Patsko, to share his views on the impacts of the disruptive trends on labor in mobility. Sergey, stage is yours.
Thank you, Nina. Hope you can see me and can hear me. Let me share my screen to slides. Okay, and I'm going to the full screen mode. Okay. Well, the topic of our today's session is the labor market for social and sustainable cities. And I work for a system integrator called Capgemini. I'm a VP of data and AI there. And of course, I will be biased from that perspective that I will be talking about the role of data and AI in mobility and how this changes the labor market in mobility. Overall, Capgemini does lots of research as well of the market, and we clearly saw from different research that we have done in the last years. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen that data and AI impacts 3 different domains. One is the workforce. Of course, because of data and AI, some jobs are becoming automated, and digital talent is scarce, so you have this workforce impact. On the other hand, because of data and AI, also we can obviously see that the processes are changing in the companies and in the organizations, and that impacts the organizational aspects. And then finally, the human resources and how the human resource function is operating within public or private organizations and companies actually also impacted by data and AI and can be improved by that. And if you think about mobility market, we have that in mobility market, this change and digital skills that are required for all these implementations of modern technologies, they are lagging behind compared to other industries. If we talk specifically on the mobility, there are several trends that we can see in this year, and also some of those trends can be explained by pandemic as well. You can see those trends on the screen, but briefly, if we go through them, zero-emission transportation sustainability is a big topic. Another topic is commercial vehicle innovation, but it's not only commercial vehicle innovation, but we are talking about robot taxi again. That's the third topic, autonomous driving. And then rethinking micromobility. And finally, digital dealerships, if you think about sales of mobility services or automotive sales, lots of this direct-to-consumer changes happening. So the idea of my talk, what I will be doing during this presentation is going one by one through those mobility trends and seeing what it means for labor and what kind of roles are required to actually deliver to those trends. And then we will summarize our findings. So if you talk about the first trend, the zero-emission transportation, we clearly observe that companies, because of the client concern, companies are looking into how to explain that they are also sustainable to their clients. It's not easy sometimes, and for that they have to do things starting from, for example, user experience when the client visits the website of the company, that this company really takes care of sustainability. And this requires already AI-driven user experience. So we need in real time to segment the clients that come in online and provide them content based on this segmentation. This is driven by AI. So this is one skill that is required, AI-driven UX. You can see those skills here in the corners. Or, for example, we want to understand what actually our clients are talking about our company from the sustainability perspective, and how can we observe what's happening. So we can use natural language processing or natural language generation and tap into the social networks and use AI to get this data out of that. Data-driven product innovation is important to actually stand up good technologies. And finally, data ecosystems and data pipelines are important because of the different journeys and that customer takes in the mobility ecosystem. So the customer may take a train, then move on to take a car, but the overall goal is to get from one city to another city. And so this data ecosystem is very important. The data is siloed, and how to get this data from different places in the market to create a seamless journey for the client. That's what is required with data ecosystem, data pipelines. So as you can see from that example, this first trend, zero-emission transportation, already requires this 4 AI and data-related skills that you can see at the corners of this picture. If you think about the next trend, which is the development of the autonomous cars, this is speeding up significantly. As Capgemini, I can tell you that we are servicing multiple clients, automotive companies, that are collecting the data and using this data to train algorithms for autonomous driving. And to go through this cycle from data production to data management to tools that integrate this with the other applications that those automotive companies have, you need again to have those data skills that you can see at the bottom of this page. Data and AI engineering, like building data platforms, data labeling, which is important to train machine learning models, data stewardship to actually take care of the data integration, and then platform architecture to bring this all up. So again, we can clearly see that these data and AI skills are required. On the third trend, the rethinking of micro-mobility, mobility as a service has enough. You can see here on this page the list of multiple startups that are working on this space. They're centralizing ticketing, they're centralizing the customer experience for travels. Lots of cities are working collaboratively with those private companies to bring on good experience for their citizens. And the skills that are required to actually tap into this mobility as a service market is the product management, because each application requires that. Again, data ecosystem, fintech, thinking about payments, for example, when you want to pay for charging your EV vehicle in this city versus you're traveling to another city. IoT, 5G for connectivity, planning and optimization is a big deal for route optimization and GIS. And finally, business model innovation, if we want to talk and work with all these startup organizations. Importantly enough, this digital dealership trend, when you can see that post-COVID, way more, almost 2 times more than before COVID pandemic, customers are willing to do lots of things remotely if they think about, for example, purchasing a new car, starting from looking for the car online and finishing with the trials of this car, or experience with AR or VR to experience the driving the new car, or even delivery of this car to the home when the car is already chosen. So this online trends, these digital dealerships require AI-driven online marketing, AR, VR skills, voice assistance within the car, vehicle delivery, including the services to organize vehicle delivery, even the drivers for that, and disinfection and contact tracing. That's the unfortunate consequence of this pandemic. For the connected vehicle and commercial vehicle innovation, we have researched what are those services that clients are willing to pay for. And I have highlighted probably 4 here: intelligent route planning, automatic distance control, and pedestrian detection, as well as collision warning. To deliver upon those 4 services that clients are willing to pay for, again, product management, data platforms, data aggregation, connectivity with IoT and 5G and edge, planning, route optimization, and EV charging services, those skills are required. To summarize, we have gone through those priorities this year for the mobility market. We see 3 buckets of or 3 pillars. This is a customer, connected customer. This is the service or product that is consumed by this customer, and then connected ecosystem that is required for the mobility business. And the change that we are seeing in the market is that for the connected customer, it's the move from ownership to mobility, from product to service, that what customers are willing to take on. On the connected services and products, it's from engineering to data owners within organizations that needs to treat data not as a side product, but data as a product, so that it will be searchable and usable by applications in the delivery cycle. And then, of course, from the connected ecosystem perspective, it's from centralization to collaboration and semantic data mesh, and this type of technologies that are required or federated learning in AI that are required to actually leverage data from different parties. That said, to summarize, these are the skills that we see from AI, data and AI perspective, and this is what we see from our system integrator Capgemini perspective, that clients and public institutions are coming to us and talking to us about. You can see that the mobility customer experience These skills are listed here, from product management to business model innovation. Mobility operations, that's from fintech to IoT to planning. And mobility data and AI is a foundation for that, where all the skills in data platform development, data scientists, data and AI engineers are required. And I finished my talk by saying that what we see is that we can organize, very often we can see that some skills are missing in the client organizations, and in this case we augment them. So sometimes they have maybe data engineers, but they're lacking MLOps experts or data scientists. Sometimes it's the other way around, but this team should work together to learn from each other and deliver the product. And at the bottom of that, we focus on how we can reskill and upskill public institutions and managers in the companies with the data and AI academies. And for that, we are not only delivering the projects, but we also work on this educational aspects. For example, for business, we have a very well-defined curriculum for business leaders. You can see this functional approach and technical approach that we have to educate our clients to get upskilled for those specific functions and roles that I have spoken already. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for that. And if you're interested to learn more how to work on upskilling your employees to meet these new requirements, please reach out to me. This is my email. And I encourage you to read some Capgemini Research Institute reports that talk about mobility and how this market is changing and the associated change in the roles and management. Thank you very much. Nina, back over to you.
Thank you very much. And don't leave the stage. I have a couple of questions to you. So it's very interesting, the work that you're carrying out in analyzing your clients and what type of skills and competence are actually missing and required. And question is to you, what type of organization coming to you with this type of request? Is it like more industry or public authorities, or who are the parties who are interested in this reskilling, upskilling in mobility market domain?
Yeah, mostly we see this demand coming from private companies, Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000, I would say. We also, of course, serve public market as well, but every year we are doing a survey on how the companies are progressing with this data and AI initiatives, and we have seen a huge uptake in the last 3 years. So I can tell you that 2 years ago, only 30% of the companies were doing some POCs in data and AI, and few of them, 12%, would have AI in production. Last year, we did same research. More than 50% of the companies already have at least one data and AI initiative in production, which means that it's not just a proof of concept, it's actually working and bringing some value. So probably this is the market driven. That's why we are having this from private companies most.
Okay, and there is also a very interesting question in the chat. So how do you think, where should upskilling start? On the level of educational institutes, from companies, or for public institutions?
My personal experience is that the fastest and easiest way to upskill people is through just doing some hands-on projects with them. So it doesn't matter if it is if you work for the municipality of the city and you want to better use the publicly available data for the mobility of your citizens, you have some employees, not necessarily they are data scientists or they are data engineers, but just start doing some projects, and maybe this project can be done by one of the system integrators, but embed your employees into this common team, and then they will learn something from that. And then, of course, you can structure it through curriculum and academy and everything, but nothing is better than hands-on exercise.
Okay, so really on-job training works the best. Thank you very much, and I would like to see you back on our panel discussion, and would like now to give a word for our second speaker, who will also picture us how urban logistic market is actually really changes on the urban logistics market are changing the workforce we're talking about. So Hans, stage is yours.
Yes, thank you. What I will do, first introduce myself. My name is Hans Quak. I'm working as a professor of applied sciences at the Breda University of Applied Sciences, and also as a researcher at TNO. And my subject is city logistics and sustainable city logistics, so I will focus on that. And also there are a lot of similarities to what Sergey already discussed, so we'll keep it a bit short there, but let's start here. Let me see. What I will do, I will first try to introduce what we mean with logistics in city, to give you a bit of an idea, because then you also get an idea on what kind of logistics professionals are there and how different that can be from urban planners sometimes. I look at the drivers for change, so what's changing the logistics system. So that also requires the professionals of the future to move in that direction, and I look to the impact on the professionals. First of all, talking about logistics in the city, a lot of people then think directly on that's about vans, bringing parcels in, but it's far more. Logistics, it's not only in a city, but it starts already far outside of the city. So what we account for, it's basically all logistics. We look at the last leg, and that means that, for example, if you go from a distribution center to a supermarket, that's also city logistics or logistics in the city, although most of the kilometers are outside the city. So that means that looking at a city, that's one perspective, but logistics, from a logistics perspective, the city is usually only a very small part. To go a bit further in what's city logistics, what kind of logistics is it? As I said, it's not just the parcel deliveries, but it's far more. We divided it in different segments. You have just general cargo, which is roll containers or pallets, for example. You have temperature controlled stuff that's going in, for example, for supermarkets, but also for hotels and restaurants. Then you have the parcels and the express that you see quite often in the neighborhoods. You have facility logistics, that's like all kind of commercial vehicles entering a city to do services, but it's also to serve, for example, facility buildings, so offices or hospitals. Then you have like the way outside the city, that's the waste logistics, bringing all the goods or the waste outside to handle it. And you have a lot of construction logistics, that's building, but also, for example, roads. And if you look then what to the, let's see whether my slides will work or not. If you look at the amount, and we measured it here in CO2 emissions, you can see that in blue. The general cargo emits most CO2, which means that most of the kilometers are in this segment. But a lot of the kilometers are outside the city because the last leg is quite long in this segment. Construction is also a very large segment. And you see the parcel and express deliveries. It's only a very small segments, only a few kilometers, because a lot of these deliveries come very close from the city. You have a lot of sorting centers or distribution centers, so the last leg is short, and then it's a small trip with a full van. To give a bit of an idea on what's in here, maybe you can see it. It's really a lot of different kind of things fall under logistics in the city. So that's supplying supermarkets, it's home deliveries, it's all kind of things. And there you see that you also have a lot of different professions working there. To go a bit further into the logistics, what you see is that very often you have a logistics planner who's planning the routes for the last leg, and you have a driver who's actually making deliveries. These are the two most important logistics professions. And what I will come to now is that we see a lot of developments that are also changing the requirements to these logistics professionals. First of all, logistics in the city. One thing, it's very often recognized for the unsustainable impacts. If you look at the traffic, logistics is only about 10% of all urban traffic, but it emits about, for CO2, it's 1/3 of all CO2 emissions comes from it, and for local emissions it's even more. But it's also essential for cities to function as a city, because in the city it's a center where people and goods come together, so you need an efficient system. Having said that, I go to the drivers for change. So what's happening at the moment? As Sergey also said, there's a large drive for sustainability, which means that, for example, that there is a drive for more zero-emission city logistics, which has a huge implication on the logistics itself, because you have to do it either by other trucks that are clean, electric vehicles for the moment, or you have to reorganize your logistics in a way that you don't do it the last leg completely with an electric vehicle because the range is limited. And then you have to cooperate with others, or you have to find a partner that can do the final leg, zero emission, if there is a zero emission zone. So this is happening at the moment, and it requires, for example, for the logistics planner to really change the planning, because the range of the electric vehicles is so much smaller than that it was from the diesel vehicles, which means that it's more complicated to do efficient route trip planning. And also for the drivers, it's different, because if you need to charge, you have to find a charging station. It's a relatively long time that you have to charge, and you also need really to drive more efficient, which means that you have to don't speed too fast, for example, because that means that your battery will get empty earlier. So that's a big change there. And also for the city planners, there's of course a big change, because you have to think about where and to locate charging locations for these large vehicles, because if they are not available, then you can't get zero emission transport. Another big change is that more and more is getting into parcel deliveries. It's not only consumers like at home that order more via the internet, but it's also the companies itself. So a lot of what used to be large truck deliveries is now a lot of small boxes deliveries, which is a completely different kind of planning. And what you see is that also the profession, the drivers, for example, that used to be like full job drivers, and now it's also a lot of subcontracting to parcel delivery guys or bike couriers. Third trend that we see is that there's the amount of space that's available at the city is becoming less and less, which means that there is a prioritized for like greening areas or for other traffic. You also see that there's more people living in the city, which means that there's less space available for logistics. And there you see that one of the things that we really need in the future is also logistics knowledge at the spatial planning, which is often lacking. Then we go to the fourth one, and that's digitization and digitalization. It's a bit in line with what Sergey already said, but a lot of things are becoming finally digital in the logistical sector, which means that you can track and trace better, you can have better information, for example, address information, you can make better planning, and you can serve customers better, but you can also easier connect to others to cooperate. And the fifth one is then automation and robotization. You can see some pictures of an autonomous delivery robot that we tested at Breda University campus. This is going. This is starting. Actually, it will be taking some time before it's actually there. But it will also mean that there's really a difference, because then you can plan in a way that you don't have to take into account the driver, but you have to take into account who's getting the things out of the vehicle. Because normally a driver doesn't only drive the vehicle, but is also handling the final part of the unloading of the vehicle, which now someone else has to do. You can use different kind of planning ideas, but then what we learned in at least the first pilots, also with other things, that there's now a lot of local information available at the driver that you somehow have to automate if this is going to be by automated vehicles. So overall, to finalize, there are a lot of changes, and it's especially at the transport company and so the planner. There will be more and more things to keep in mind for the planner. It will be more complicated, so the job of a planner will be in the first period more difficult, and then in the end maybe it will be more autonomous, so more autonomous algorithms and things that take over. And also at the authorities, things change, and that means that the knowledge on especially logistics and how it works is more important in the spatial planning for the coming years. And this is where I will stop my presentation and give the floor back to Nina.
Yes, but just a couple of minutes before you later join us from the panel. Thank you very much. It was really interesting to see, of course, with this special focus on the domain knowledge. And if we look at the professions as an example, for example, the role of the postman, right? From one side, you mentioned that there is increasing volumes of the parcels due to the e-commerce. And from another side, of course, with ongoing automation and delivery robots. So is there a short-term upcoming disruption, for example, in the domain of the postmen and the roles that they're changing?
It's already changing a lot. And what you see is that a postman and also a delivery man used to be like a full job, and now it's getting more and more a flexible job where you can do it for a couple of hours. It's more like the delivery guys for doing also food deliveries, for example, the meals. You do that for 2 hours, 3 hours as a student, and not so much as a full-time job or a profession. And that's also, it's not the case with the delivery guy, the delivery man of parcels yet, but it will be going into that direction as well.
Due to automation, right? And the delivery.
Partly due to automation, and also because of a lot of people don't want to pay any money for the delivery, which means that, of course, trying to get the cheapest out of it.
Yeah, and also another one of your roles or your functions and the professional world, of course, the professor of smart cities within the Breda University, right? And do you already see the changes that you observed, changing market demand actually in terms of what industry is asking from university students? And maybe you can also share a couple of words of how you are addressing or incorporate these observed changes in education.
You see it especially at the data skills of students. Of course, in the curriculum, you see also that students have to learn more and more there in integrating. But the logistics sector used to be quite conservative in a way that a lot of things were not digital, and now more and more is getting digital, and then it's also possible to do things with these digital data, and that's where students now start, and it's a lot of work, and you can see it in all kinds of things. It's in address intelligence that you actually can plan more information. With more information, you can make a better planning, but it's also in cooperation between different companies where it's easier to share. So you see it in a lot of things.
Okay, thank you very much, and see you then at the panel discussion. And I would like now to give a word for our third speaker. And here we are really getting also a very interesting overseas industry view on the developments in the built environment. Dmitry.
Hello, guys. I'm joining the session from California, so it's pretty early morning here. Hello, everybody. So let me share my screen. And I'm gonna talk about construction automation. So my name is Dmitry Korolev. I am CEO at Traceair, and in Traceair we try to automate construction as much as possible. And today I'm gonna share some thoughts why it's important and how it's gonna impact the labor market. But first of all, a little bit about myself. So I'm originally in physics, but I've been doing software development for more than 18 years, founded 3 software companies, and I had 0 experience in construction before we started Traceair in 2015. But we just fell in love into the industry, and I'll explain why. On this graph, you can see the productivity for different industries. And as you can see, humanity had pretty great boost in industries like agriculture and manufacturing. But for construction industry, the productivity is pretty flat for the last 60 years. And the fact that we didn't have any experience in construction allowed us to have a fresh look on the industry. And we are trying to kind of get an answer how objects appear in real life. And the idea that came to our mind, the idea that I want to share with you, is pretty simple. So when architects and design engineers, they create a new object, when they create a model, when they create a blueprint of how the object should be, that's the pure act of creation. But then the process of project execution should be just a copy paste from the virtual object into the real object. And for us, people who grew up in digital world, this process should be as smooth as we used to see it in video games. So you click on the map, select the structure you want to build, and then you just watch the progress bar while your project is appearing. But for some reason, construction industry is not there yet. And when we try to understand why it's happening right now, we found pretty interesting insight about the industry and the fact that there are a lot of software solutions for engineers, but not for the majority of people on the project team. So when we're talking about engineers, that's pretty limited group on the project, only 10% of the project team. And yes, they do have solutions like Autodesk solutions, Trimble solutions, but mostly those solutions focused on design phase, while majority of the project team, 90% of the project team, they don't have this type of software, and they just use their intuition or their previous experience while they executing the project. And that's why we have this flat graph for the productivity. And that's why we created our solution, Traceair, with a high-level idea that our solution should help with this conversion from design into reality as fast as possible. And very high-level view how it works. The main idea is that the software compares the current state of the project, how the project looks right now, the data that we get from reality capture sensors like drones, and then the software compares the current state with what they have to build with all this project documentation, and then guides people on site, people on the ground, how they should perform their work in order to finish project as fast as possible, and therefore projects completed ahead of schedule, under budget. So that's type of quotes that we receive from our clients, and that makes our vision closer to reality. And when we're talking about, let me give you some example on some type of guidance that we provide for our clients, for our users. So that's the grading foreman, the guy who controls machinery on site. And he used ruler to find the best route for his machinery on site. And that's pretty common way in the industry right now. While with a solution like ours, now people on the ground without any kind of technical background, they see the right guidance, how they should execute their daily jobs, to execute their daily operations. And now when we're talking about trends into the industry, trends in construction automation, so we can split inefficiencies on a project into two main buckets. 20% of inefficiencies happening because of the machinery operations, and 30% it's about how you plan your sequence of steps, what you're doing on site in order to execute the project. And I would say the analogy that I can bring here is pretty similar how autonomous cars are evolving right now. So some companies working on how the software controls cars, how it steers the wheel, but still, if you want to drive from point A to point B, you also have to have some route optimization according to the road conditions, according to the traffic jams and all that stuff. So this analogy explains what's happening in construction automation as well, because there are companies who are working on machinery automation, so how to create machinery that will do the job without operators behind the wheel, and that will kind of create boost in these machinery operations. And also there are companies working on planning automation, so how to create the right schedule for the project, how to create the right sequence of steps, what you're doing on site, how to adjust the schedule according to changing conditions in the industry. And now a little bit about kind of results, how it's going to impact people in the industry. So first of all, construction industry is pretty tough industry. So people spend the whole day either in dusty hills here in California or in like frozen desert in Siberia. And construction industry is pretty harmful industry for your health. So I've seen a lot of kind of accidents on site when people driving machinery and got some injuries, or when people kind of spend the whole day in this not healthy environment, and therefore like their health affected as well. So with solutions that I explained before, like autonomous machinery on site, or software that will help with guidance, with the right sequencing, now people can, let's say, see it in trailer or even at home, just controlling remotely how machines working on site, how things executing on site. So therefore, the whole industry becomes much more safer for people working in the industry. Another trend that we see in our construction industry is like the labor shortage. So when we're talking about new generation trying to work in the industry, and actually it's according to US Department of Labor, it should the industry should create 6.5% new jobs every year in order to fulfill the demand that the construction industry has right now. And when you try to attract new people in the industry, usually they say like, come on guys, you are doing things without any changes for the last century, so we're not going to join the industry. We prefer to work somewhere where we do have all these new solutions. And when these new solutions that we're developing, or solutions that other companies are developing in this automation, will be in place in the industry, then definitely you can kind of fulfill this gap on how many people needed in the industry right now and how many people willing to go to the industry. So that, and as a kind of last effect, it's gonna boost the whole productivity. Again, like you don't need to spend the whole day on site, and a lot of kind of people in the industry right now, they are like appeared in their homes pretty late just because they're kind of involved into operations from early morning to the late evening. So now with the solutions like autonomous machinery, like with the software that automate a lot of workflows on job sites, now people will be much more happier driving to their homes early on, and in general, like humanity will have this boost in the construction industry. And finally, all these objects that we're using every day, like roads, homes, hospitals, factories, will be in real life much more faster, and that will drives the whole humanity to new situation much faster. So that's the short overview about construction automation. And if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And also you have this email, my email. So let me know if you have any thoughts or ideas about construction automation. I'm happy to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. It's also very interesting to have this industry view, and also like different in our mobility world, right? But also showing us what's happening on the urban design side. And we have a question from the audience, if you can elaborate in case if you have any figures on that, on actually if you have how many people does this solution replace, or for how many people it improves efficiency, and if you can also give some more examples of new jobs that are being created to facilitate the deployment of solutions.
Yeah, so first of all, about replacement. Definitely when we're talking about operators behind machinery, that's type of jobs that will be replaced in the nearest future. But again, like it's not something that like people who are sitting behind the machinery, they want to be replaced. They want to, let's say, control this machinery not from the steering wheel again in dusty or frozen conditions, but they want to see it in somewhere in warm, cozy place, just to overwatch how the machinery is performing. And that's something that, like, if we're talking about, let's say, here in the US, there are a lot of unions of operators, and they are not afraid of like some autonomous machinery replacing jobs on site. They're thinking more about, okay, finally we're gonna have much more safer conditions on site for our employees, and that's why unions actually collaborate a lot with companies like Build Robotics that provide this autonomous machinery, or with companies like Caterpillar or Komatsu, who are also working on these machinery automation solutions. And if we're talking about type of skills that are needed for that, definitely like more people with a robotic background, with a background in robotics now can work in the industry, because again, before there was like no solutions, people doing jobs the way they were doing that like 60 years. Now we see more demand for like people with right technical skills, how to onboard all these solutions, how to like control machinery, how to onboard solutions like our software, for example. And here I'm talking about like non-tech savvy people who kind of before didn't have any experience in technology, but because companies, when they build these solutions, they focus on non-tech savvy people. So that kind of an easy way for people without any technical background. Now they can kind of become much more efficient and still kind of work in the industry they love. And also another trend when we're talking about this kind of different situation, how engineers involved in the project right now. So engineers originally, their main goal is to design the project, to create kind of this initial virtual object that must be realized in real life. But also right now, engineers, they involved a lot into execution phase, when people on the ground, they ask them a lot about questions like, okay, should we do this way or that way? Back to this slide that non-tech savvy people, they don't have solutions. And that cuts time, engineers' time. So the engineers become the bottleneck. I mean, right now they are a bottleneck. So they have to work on a design, they have to kind of create new objects, but instead of that, they are spending their time helping people on the ground with some like nitty-gritty details during the project execution. So that situation, that like new trends that are appearing in the industry, will allow engineers to focus their efforts more on a design phase. Therefore, we're gonna have like faster design, faster new kind of objects that need to be built in real life.
Process.
So it's win-win for different type of people in the industry.
In the industry, very interesting. And like you also like, okay, that's your product, but you're also CEO of a company. When you are hiring people to work at your company, which skills and competencies you are looking for? Is it domain knowledge, technology knowledge? So what
great question. So first of all, yeah, since we're kind of a startup company, right? Like first of all, you have to have the right attitude to work in a changing kind of circumstances, and that's the number one priority when we hiring people. Like, okay, you have to kind of be okay with how things are doing in a startup reality. But when we're talking about skills, definitely we do need the construction background, but also we are looking for kind of the same view on the industry that the one we have right now. So when we are talking about guys like it's not okay to do things how you did things like 50 years ago. So we're looking for people who already kind of went through this road of understanding that construction is not that efficient right now. So when, let's say, like young engineers who just graduated from the industry, from some like universities, and when they, let's say, spent a couple or like 3 years working in the industry, so we are looking for the same kind of mindset in their understanding of the industry. That, yeah, I studied a lot to do like to build objects in real life, but like after 2 or 3 years working in the industry, I realized that yeah, it's so many inefficiencies in the industry. So I want to join some companies who are fighting with this inefficiency. So that's the kind of second priority for us, what we are looking in new generation.
Very nice, interesting view. Thank you very much. And now I would like to go further in our presentation line and give a floor to Wolfgang, who will really present us a very interesting study. It was already published a couple of months ago, but is extremely relevant to the mobility changes we are undergoing. So Wolfgang, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Nina. Back to Europe, to Germany. I'm sitting here in the southwest of Germany, and my name is Wolfgang Schade, and I'm industrial engineer and working on mobility projects, climate mitigation projects, scenarios, and so on. And I brought with me some two scenario projects or quantification projects, which work in the mobility field and deal with the transition that we expect for the next 20 and even 40 years, and trying also to identify the impact on employment and on the labor market in the mobility sector. So the slides are fine, yes. So this is mine. The first one, I'm looking at two periods with these two studies. One is transition to sustainable mobility, which will take place in these scenarios, and I think it will as well in reality, until 2035 due to electrification and new mobility services, and change the employment in the mobility industry. And then adding on another scenario for Europe, where we have more autonomous and automated vehicles, and where connected and automated driving becomes an important feature, which is running or finishing the period 2035 to 2050. So these are the two things or scenarios that I will try briefly to explain and show conclusions that we have made on employment. Next slide, please. This is now from the first study on sustainable mobility scenarios in Germany, running until 2035. You see here the modal split is the indicator to explain briefly the scenario. So on the left-hand side, there is the reference scenario, which is for the year 2015, and the light blue color is the modal share of car transport. And then on the right, or in the middle and the right-hand side, there are two scenarios how the system can change in the future until 2035. You see that the light blue color is shrinking in the electrification scenario. So there we achieve sustainable mobility largely by electrifying road transport, so cars and electric buses and so on. And but also offering additional mobility services and offering the connection between the service in a better way. So that's why car transport is reducing. But for instance, you see the dark green share increasing from the left to the middle, which is then automated bus transport, autonomous buses, small shuttle buses, and so on. You see some information on how transport is developing. So we see an increased demand in terms of passenger kilometer, 5%, but we see also a reduced car ownership. So from 560 as today in Germany per 1,000 inhabitants to 430 in 2035. So that's the middle scenario. On the right, there is the scenario that we achieve sustainable mobility, of course, to some extent as well by electrification, but also by investing a lot more in multimodality. So merging and connecting the modes, implementing multimodal hubs, offering platforms. And again, then the car transport is reduced to less than half modal share. We get also much more rail modal share, that's the light green, because also there is a rail system rolled out into the regions also, and well connected with the other modes. And here we reduce overall the demand because also urban planning is changing, and the car ownership reaches even 300 cars per 1,000. So these are two scenarios. And then on the next slide, we see what this would have as employment impacts in Germany. So the left-hand side, electrification, right-hand side, multimodality scenario. These bars show the change of employment in different sectors in the economy. And of course, due to the electrification, we see on the very left side bars, the red is 2035, the losses of employment in this internal combustion engine sector, which reaches in the left side electrification about 130,000 jobs in Germany and close to 300,000 jobs in the multimodality scenario, because we have also a lower number of cars. On the other hand, we see sectors that gain, like the electric mobility and battery sectors, and also the sector which supports the automation technologies, the other sector. So they gain something like 50 to 60,000 jobs. And the largest gains, they are in these mobility services. Yeah? So where there are shuttle buses, where new ride-sharing systems, where new multimodal hubs are installed. So there we can expect something like 200 and even 340,000 new jobs. But of course, this is structural change. Yeah? We lose some of the manufacturing jobs and we get more jobs in these services. And we also lose manufacturing jobs that work with the metals, yeah? And replace them by expertise that is used on available for running electronic components, developing electronic components and chemical expertise, the batteries, for instance. So this is a view until 2035. And on the next slide, we go to the study that was also mentioned by Nina, which is now looking at Europe, building on 4 scenarios how connected and automated driving in Europe will develop until 2050. There are 2 scenarios, first 2, which develop a fast connected automated technology. And on the right-hand side, there are little indications when the different levels of automation enter the fleet. So level 3 somewhere in, I think it's 2022 in the first scenario, level 4 in 2030, and level 5 in 2035. And in the other scenarios, in the lower scenarios, these levels are achieved later on, meaning also the experience of autonomous vehicles will be later in the market, and will be later, for instance, in the bus market or also in the freight market. So also we are talking here about autonomous trucks in the different scenarios. And in the earliest point of time of these scenarios when these enter is 2030, and we will see this in the scenario in the next slide. Where we see the labor market for all transport services. So there's the time axis, and until about 2030, 35, we see there's still a growing demand in the mobility services, both together shown here, passenger and freight, because we have still a growing transport demand, also on both sides. So we need more drivers, for instance, bus drivers, truck drivers, parcel service drivers, as we have heard before. But in these first 2 scenarios with the fast deployment of CAT, we see that around 2035, we see a strong decline of transport employment, and which happens also in the other scenarios to some extent, but much later. So the automation here reduces obviously the numbers of drivers, and we have looked this at also from the bottom up level. This is now the aggregate figure. We will see it on the next slide for passenger services. We looked also at different categories of jobs. Each bar is a category. So on the left are the drivers, and you see in the last years we reduced the number of drivers in passenger services by half, and we get some. I think you have to click, please. Some additional jobs. If you click, in the IT stuff, which supports the operations and which develops the IT tools to run the mobility services, the autonomous shuttles, and also in other staff categories, which currently is not really existing very much. These are the stewards, which support in stations or in the shuttle buses and other modes and services. So there is an increase of staff needed to run the system as well. And shifting to freight, we see here the 4 scenarios on the right-hand side, where there are 8 curves, so the dashed curves that show you the non-driver employment in the freight sector, which is more or less stable, and the solid curve shows the driver numbers in the freight services. So we start with like 3 million driver jobs in freight in Europe. Due to the demand increase, they increase even up to 3.5 or 4 in some scenarios. But when then we get the market of autonomous trucks developing, the drivers are substantially replaced. Of course, there are again IT stuff is required to run the systems, the operations. So there's an increase, but it's not compensating in freight transport for the loss of driver jobs. While in passenger transport, it was the case that at least in numbers, the loss of driver jobs is compensated by IT and by stewards and other stuff, which is not the case for freight. Yeah, and you can shift to the next slide, which just shows the result now for the 4 scenario at the regional level. We have also differentiated that some regions are forerunners in CAT deployment and other regions are followers or late followers, and this is depicted in the scenario. So you see the highest job losses in the mobility service where there's dark red, and this is then also happening in the first 2 fast deployment scenarios. The difference is that on the first scenario, there is more private cars, such that the jobs in the mobility service are not so much replaced. In the second scenario, the automation is strongly also focusing on the mobility service, so on buses and taxi cars and similar cars. So this is the regional picture of the 4 scenarios of changes of jobs, and in the change of skills, which is the final slide here. Now you can switch. This is fine. I mean, we have seen in numbers that there is big structural change in the mobility service can be expected, and we have to think also about these skills change that is needed. So we can expect with these job types that I mentioned, there's an increased need of supervision skills, of intervention skills, but only intervening when it is needed, when there is a problem, when help is needed. So you have to decide if there is support needed. Then there are these collaboration skills needed. For instance, if you are a steward and have to help the passenger of autonomous vehicles, so it's a different job than driver jobs before. And you have to understand also more about the technology of autonomous vehicles and about the environment of autonomous vehicles, how they behave. But these are skills that are needed in increasing form in the future, and you need less these skills like to behave autonomously as a driver of a truck crossing Europe, or having a lot of routine type jobs and using the machinery. So these are things that you will need less in the mobility sector with all these scenarios taking place. And I think also they are describing elements that will happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. It's really interesting to, from one side, see whole European picture and also have a view on what's going in the German market and specifically, but also to see really how one specific technology, what kind of disruption it can bring on the level of professions and also skills that we need to operate. And I have one question for you, actually, maybe a little bit of tricky, because of course there is a lot of opinions when really this full-speed automation will really take place on our streets, and depending if it's a policy institution or research or whatever, you have different timelines. But what would be your actually personal opinion? When are we going to see the full transport automation? And more important, when do we need to start reorient and reskill people to be ready to this full automation happening?
It's a difficult and interesting question. I mean, what we see now is that in certain areas and with limited speeds, we already have these autonomous shuttles. So we will have them next 2 years then really operating. So at the moment, it's test sites. But I mean, the scenario that I've shown for the freight sector is probably really only in 2030 and beyond there. But in relation to the skilling, I think we have really to start now to think about new skills. Yeah, I mean, it's a market where we also have labor shortage, the driver market, like it was shown in the construction market in the US. And we have at the moment to attract new drivers. I have shown that it's a growth path still, but we have to explain them that they have that they will learn skills and new skills that are also useful for the period beyond 2030 when their profile of job is changing. That's we have to explain them already now when we try to attract them into this sector. So skilling is already today and in the next 5 years an important issue to be prepared for that market.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And I think we'll have time to also tackle this question a bit in our panel discussion. But for now, I would like to give a floor to our last speaker, Cristina, and really looking forward to your presentation that will give really another view on the questions we are raising today.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Nina. I'm trying to share the screen. Yes. Right. Perfect. Well, good afternoon to everyone. I'm Cristina Pronello. I'm professor of transport, and my presentation will be slightly different from the previous one because I will try to have a sort of a different view, if you want, about how to shape the future workforce in terms of which factors are important, which are the dilemmas. I will highlight which are the potential bias, and which could be potential solution at the very end as a final suggestion. So I will exactly follow this list in terms of approach to frame this very complex topic that is labor force and workforce in this completely transforming period where artificial intelligence, digitalization, automation, as the colleague showed before, are disrupting for sure the business as usual, we can say, and above all in terms of workforce. And so this was raised 10 years ago, around 10 years ago by the European Commission with the white paper on transport, where they claimed the need to align the competitiveness of transport sector with the social agenda. But why they are so worried about social agenda? But they are worried because effectively, the big changes, the paradigmatic changes in the different eras have generated, at least fear or worries, and so to try to deal with these big changes is very, very important. And we need, as a scientist, for sure, at least as scientists, but also the industry needs to give hints and suggestions to policymakers to understand how they have to deal with the transition to the future of the workforce in this digital era. And also because, and I will come back on this point later on, this digitalization and automation has highlights some aspects that according to me are very important, that are not necessarily only the technological skill. This is given for granted. But what about cognitive, social and emotional skills? Question mark. I will come back on that just in a while. So I'm starting from the dilemmas, because I said at the beginning, according to me, there are some dilemmas. And I found at least 3 dilemmas that...
Cristina, sorry.
Yes?
You're not changing the slides. So we are still on the title slide in the presentation.
That's strange, because I'm going on with the slides, and so this evidently doesn't appear. Wait. I don't know what's happened. I try again to share.
Perfect. Yeah.
I try the screen and then I go to the presentation. Probably this is more simple. Let's see.
Yes, now we see your slide about dilemmas.
That's great. That's great. I was so probably I don't know what's happened. Thanks for informing me. Well, I was speaking about the dilemmas, the 3 dilemmas, and the 3 dilemmas, according to me, are one that is very, very important for the universities. Silo specialization versus multi-specialization. The second one is social versus technological determinism, we would see. And the final, the individual competition versus collaborative knowledge. So let's start from the first one, that is, for me, a crucial one. Why? Because we know very well what is the silos approach. It's effective, for sure, to well divide and distinguish the labor, but often creates barriers, walls, lack of communication and exchange of ideas, and this can hamper innovation. And usually, thinking out of the box is less evident with a silos approach. So the non-standard problems are much more difficult to be solved. While on the other side, the multi-specialization, or the most famous word, interdisciplinarity, could help because having a wider view on the problems helps to find solution. For sure, there is the lack of vertical knowledge, and according to what the colleague said before, this could be a problem. So effectively, this aspect could be very good for some jobs and very bad for other jobs. And in any case, there is a basic problem that underpin the possibility to go towards this kind of approach. That in universities so far, even though we speak a lot about multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, definitely all our sectors are very disciplinary. This means that we are evaluated according to our disciplines, and if you stay to, how to say, work more in an interdisciplinary way, you could have some problems in being evaluated in your career. So this is a big problem because it's the basis of education for the future labor skill. Has to be kept in mind. The second dilemma is the social versus technological determinism. Every aspect is claiming that we are shaping the society and the changes in individual behavior. The society says we are so strong that we change, also we can induce or change the technology, while technology says, but we are shaping completely the society and influencing the individual behavior. We can say that both are true, and probably seeing this is in a circle is much better than seeing as there's 2 parts or 2 sides of the coin. And the third one is another problem we have in the research, in the university before, but not only, also in the industry, in the competition, in a market that is open to competition, is that we are used to have a very traditional approach in training and learning individuals. You have to be the best one, you have to perform as the best one, and so on. And so this is related to IPR for sure, when we have some patents or the companies are fighting for having the supremacy. But this probably could create less divergent thoughts. And for making a real innovation, a strong innovation, we need to have divergent ideas and thoughts. On the other side, so the collaborative knowledge could be a solution, but is exactly the opposite. This is the point. And so, how to say, if we are all together, if we brainstorm and we share everything, for sure there are no barriers, everything is open. And so on the other side, the left side of the slide, IPR and so on, could become a problem. Is in any case, without doubt, that individuals can learn more if a shared understanding is created in the group. So in any case, could be a win-win, but it's not so easy to implement in the current market we have. Said that, we have 3 dilemmas that can be overcome working on that, but the other problem, according to me, is the big bias. I see a big bias in not only in the transport sector, in general, in the society, because we start from a prejudice that generating the bias. The prejudice is the false hypothesis. We say, and we have seen, automation is running very fast, digitalization is the same, artificial intelligence will become the intelligence, will overcome all of us because it will become better than us, and people is feared about that. So to deal with this big challenge, we have to become all technological advanced, because it seems also hearing the companies and so on that we need to have all genius in data sciences, it's very technological advanced. That is not said, because this means that if this is true, if you don't change completely and become technological advanced, you will lose your job. And otherwise, if you want to try to deal with this problem, be retrained, upskilled, reskilled, so that you will find a new job. Yes, but there is a big but. The but is, are we sure that all the people can be trained and reskilled or upskilled in a reasonable time, we can say? If they have a very, very low level of education, I'm quite sure that it's impossible in a reasonable time to have these people completely reskilled or upskilled. And in addition, there is another problem. A lot of people probably have very low attitude towards technology. They don't like at all, or they don't want at all to work in all jobs related to technology. So what does it mean? That we cannot train everyone, for sure, and we have to think that a big part of the society probably will be untouched or slightly touched by this, we can say, disruption. So, as no one can acquire the technological level that a lot of jobs will require, is this a problem? I don't think so. It's just important to say, okay, I'm changing completely paradigm, which is the change of paradigm. Saying that and being aware that a lot of sector will probably need not so much in terms of automation. Some of the sector don't need automation at all. I'm trying to exaggerate and exasperating the reasoning. Why? Because human beings are the fundamental pillar in some sector or activities. I'm just joking. I say if we want to collect strawberries, it's quite hard to find something that can be done by machine instead of hands if we want to have, how to say, the strawberry that are in a good state. I'm just joking. But just to say also the handicraft, if we think about my country and the important heritage it has, how to say that we will substitute completely the ability and capability of human beings in doing something and substitute with machine. I don't want to imagine that. So what is the point? We can use the concept of horizontal and vertical specialization and, very important, skill assessment and mapping on the competencies to do what? To try to valorize at best the individual skills and for each one find what is the best, but also to allow to the territory to not be shrinking, because this is one of the problems related to this fast run towards technology and everything is regulated by machine or by digital aspect and so on. And so also human relations can be valorized if we think that and like coming back to the first slide, the emotional aspects are so important also for those that will have a very advanced technological skills, because having to deal with machine, something that is called is neutral, it's not a human being, needs to be very, how to say, well-centered, very strong, because, so we need much more emotional intelligence than usually I look at my students, the medium average engineering have. And this is very important also to reduce early school leaving, that, for example, in our country is a big problem. So to conclude, what to do? We try with the We Transform project that I had the honor to coordinate, is a coordination support action under the H2020 program. We aim to change this paradigm and try to put in action, making concrete what I said before. In which way? We have thought about to create and set up a living hub that is formed by actors, main actors that are the social part, because it's very important when we are speaking about workforce, public institutions, cities, regions, transport authorities, and transport operators, and industry in general, and research and development entities for sure. All together, putting in sort of virtual, we can say, lab, working with workers, the citizens that are workers, that are in the center of our interest, try to exchange ideas, solutions, and so on, thanks to what? Artificial intelligence that is used as, let me judge again, slave, making the dirty work. The dirty work is done by the machine, by artificial intelligence, just selecting what is worthy to be discussed using human brains, so using the collective intelligence. This can really generate a value, and the exchange of knowledge is a big value. And this will, according to our hope, allow to manage the transition rate to accommodate the workforce skill adoption to the demands of the new digital era, and using a sort of framework that will allow to the human beings, and so collective intelligence, to express the best of them. So really only use the humans, thinking that the machine are something that serves to us in an opportunistic way and not vice versa. And the idea is to create a big community that, supporting the dialogue and giving ideas and exchanges values and ideas, will create a big stakeholder forum that will stay there also after the project, if effectively we will be able to build a strong community. The advisory board will help in terms of high-level expert to look at what we are doing and readdress in case of we are losing the way, but I don't think this will be the case. And definitely, we want to leave in heritage a sort of durable and effective dialogue that will stay after us, to always support, that is our final aim with the project, the European Commission in writing the policy agenda. So we will definitely write a policy agenda for the Commission, trying to give solution to all the problems, issues I've just presented so far. I'm finished. I'm hoping to have stayed in the time. I thank you very much, and I'm open to any kind of question you would like to ask.
Thank you very much, Cristina, so for this very different view, and also overcoupling view on questions we are discussing. And there's one question we have from the audience. How do you define the human skills that cannot be replaced with machines? And have there been any attempts to classify such types of skills?
I am defining the human skill that cannot be replaced by the machine. Example. It's not effectively in the transport, but also for the transport, I have an example. Let's start from the more simple example. That is, we know that several countries, as Italy, Japan, but also Germany, are countries where the average age is quite high. So we are, I'm speaking for my country, an old country. And when you have a lot of elderly people, you have a lot of problems to face, for sure. And the caregiving is an important part of also of the economy. And in this case, sometimes you see at television the robots that are just make some server or helping and supporting people. But frankly speaking, in this case, it's impossible to substitute the ability and capability of human beings for giving cares to people who needs what? Who needs human warmth, who needs exchange, speaking. Also the people that we know is a problem of our era, the Alzheimer's and so on, are no more able to interact so much. But there, the human capability, the emotional intelligence are fundamental. We cannot substitute with machine. In case of transport, effectively the colleague said, the driver will disappear. If the autonomous vehicles will become the reality, yes, for sure. But are we sure that we can live completely alone in some conditions, the user in a public transport system? Probably not. So in this case, we need the people that are both able to interact with the machine in case of problems, but able to be, how to say, communicative enough to support the people that usually prefer to interact with a human being than with a machine if they have some problem. So I think that a lot of works cannot be substituted by machine. And we have not to forget to take care about the formation and training also of those people, not only about technological skills. This is given for granted, this is the progress. But all the rest, we have not to throw away.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. And we have now 5 minutes before we are terminating the session. So I think there's only one question that I can ask to the panel. So Cristina, if you can say and stay, and other speakers can appear back online. There's only one question that I would like to ask you before we will end up the session. Maybe can each of you give advice to us, educational institutions, right? If you can name 3 of 3 to 5 core skills and competencies you think we should develop in the young professionals or within our upskilling or reskilling program that we are running? What that would be? What would you advise us? Maybe let's go in the order of presentations. Sergey, what would you advise us? 5 skills and competencies.
Well, obviously, data science and artificial intelligence. And it doesn't mean that you need to be a data scientist yourself, of course. But even taking the course from Coursera, for example, from Andrew NG on the essentials of data science, it's called AI for Everyone. That would help. That would definitely help. So that's probably the most important skill. And the second, I will only name 2. And the second is data engineering, because there is no AI without data. And handling data as an asset, what is now called data products, and the concept of data mesh, these are relatively new concepts. And I think given this expertise to professionals, young professionals on data engineering and data management is important as well.
Thank you. Hans?
Yes, I can only agree. So I wouldn't add so much there. But one thing is that it's also good to realize that the local intelligence, so to say, of the human being in the process is still very, very important. And you see that at the logistics process, for example, drivers can do so much, and it's so hard to get it all automated. So in that sense, don't overestimate the abilities of what we can do in AI and with the data, and also go and test and see what's possible, because you can see, and again I come back to the logistics. Of course, it's nice if you can automate transport, but still the parcel or the pallet, it's not loading itself. So you still need something there, and then you need another robot who's going to do that. And so there are a lot of barriers also in automating. Test it and then see what's feasible and what's not.
Thank you.
I want to highlight 2 high-level skills or abilities. So first of all, please stay open-minded for any type of new technology that appear in the market, or like in general appeared in our real life. Because when you are open-minded for some new technologies, then definitely you can easily take courses on Coursera, or like create new products, or like change something that's not that efficient right now. And the second skill is another kind of high-level skill to challenge, try to challenge everything that you you think is not efficient right now. So the ability to be in that situation, like to convert your mind into a situation when you challenge old approaches, that's also a pretty important skill.
Thank you. Wolfgang, what would you add to this list?
Sorry?
What would you add to this list?
Oh, I'm not so much. I think I was thinking about creativity. It's difficult to replace, and I think I wanted to add or to emphasize and agree to what Cristina said, that it's not possible to work with all this reskilling, that we cannot reach all the people. That's why we had also included in our analysis the opportunity that some people can come from the driver job to the steward job, which is the one that needs emotional intelligence, which needs to collaborate with people and so on. So, but this is maybe something which can also not be skilled. So people have it or people don't have it. So this is another difficult aspect, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristina.
So I not completely agree with what you said, Wolfgang, about that you have or not have it. It's not said, because some can be acquired, we can say. I make a concrete example, adding some new skills. Because companies ask to me, so they ask to me, have you some students that are ready to do that? And so I design a course for trying to satisfy the request of the industry. They asked to me the capability of negotiation. Negotiation is very important capability that is missing because university doesn't train in that sense. And I organized this course of 40 hours with experts from different companies doing negotiation. And they at the beginning said, we didn't learn this ability, but we just learning by doing, we can say. In the company, we have to learn in some way. And now they have acquired some capability to try to externalize to other people this capability. But what I observed when the students were grouped in groups and they try to negotiate, so they have something to negotiate, the two parts, they enjoy so much and they discover something that we're not used to at all. So the critical thinking is another skill that, according to me, is fundamental, and we are losing completely. Because in university, also in the engineering school, they are very obliged to, think in the mainstream. For me, this is devastating. So critical thinking, important, and the method, my God. I have not any thesis that is doing a thesis, is know how to write a simple document. So with a logical flow, we just absolutely black. So all the time I prepared a document, some guidelines for the thesis to not be killed by the professor when he revised the report, to say, okay, the method is important. And another skill that university doesn't force so much. I'm a courses at the end of the 5 years, and at the end, I have to learn them how to do. My God, that's unbelievable. So I think that university has to change, but it's very slow to change. Also, for what I said before, now finally in France was not true. Before they start to include the so-called soft skill is simplistic, but in the engineering schools, now we are trying Italy slowly. But what they miss is really the interaction with other. For the information scientists and the data scientists are the worst one. My God, when I'm teaching, if I don't speak about coding, or they are trying, you see, they say, hey guys, give me something to code. This is, I don't think that Dmitry says that it is not what he needs, because he needs much more than that. So for me, these are the skills. Hoping to have an answer to Memo with the question that he asked, the second one.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting part. So my take on it is really like be open to innovation, critical thinking, creativity, not forget about it, and of course not to forget about technology and data science. So it's really a new generation of professionals that we need to have around. Thank you very much. Well, it's a pity we didn't have more time for a discussion, but I really hope to move around in another setting that we can continue it, hopefully also in a real life occasion. Thanks very much for your presentations, for your input, and yes, enjoy the rest of the conference. Yes, Cristina?
May I invite the kind speakers to join to our workshop the 30th of June of We Transform? I will contact you.
Perfect. Wonderful. We'll be looking forward for invitation, okay?
Great.
Okay.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.